there meditating and pondering on the ways of the world today. Thinking of my people Africa and the state of the continent today. How mothers fed their children today. As granny goes down on her knees every day and prays. How many souls are dying from causes that could be prevented? If we did have leaders who cared for us today. Oh, 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 oh. Zayana Yahweh. Zayana way. Zayana way. Africa rise, young. Every 4 years, the politicians say he's your servant today. And after you vote for them, they metamorphose into your masters. I say, have your say, we'll have our way, yeah. Not no strange, it's cow demon crosses. Meanwhile, souls are dying from causes that could be prevented. If we did have leaders who cared for us today. Zayana Yahweh. Zayana way. Zayana way. Africa rise.
We can be great. World turbulence among the politics. Never hypocrite, lava. Never ever quit, just a little bit longer. Victory is near, they're gonna disappear, go under. The leaders them no care, never tend to share. Babylon quit, the shedding of blood. Your heart a go suffer if you show no love. Stay away, consciousness. What the God in nation if for no righteousness? Just make sure that you.
All right. 1212 Radio Culture. We also live on iCulture TV. Give me some bass, give me some reverb. Take me back to the 70s. Give me some rhythm, give me some consciousness. Give me some messages about equal rights and justice. Send it across the borders of Jamaica. And we're talking about dub poetry. This art form is one of the other musical exports from that wonderful island of Jamaica. And one of its proponents is my guest today. We will shortly be going to speak with one of the best proponents of this art form. And we'll be talking about the genesis, the journey, and the future of the art form. Until then, enjoy this one. We will be right back.
Sometimes I feel like say, so when I check out South Africa, and all the blacks them are suffer, and then I think about Ethiopia, and though we face with hunger, then me go remember Jamaica, and though the people them are suffer, I'm about to look to the foreigner, Europe and Canada, Australia and India, and then forget about Africa and the Caribbean area. It make me feel like crying. I feel like crying. I'm not lying. I really feel like that.
I feel I cry. I'm not lying. Sounds of the man, unmistakable voice of the man called Yasus Afari. Yasus Afari is my guest today, and we will be talking, as I stated, about the genesis, the journey, and the future of the art form dub poetry. We're currently facing a bit of a connectivity challenge with Yasus Afari. Please stay put, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with my guest, Yasus Afari.
Making healthy food choices are a daily challenge for most people. You see, the food you eat can either be the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. Introducing the Green Health Pharmacy and Functional Medicine Clinic that gets to the root cause of your disease. We present to you the True Green Foods brand that allows you to enjoy healthy food options without sacrificing the foods you love. True Green Foods have low-carb swallow options for fufu, banku, tuozafi, eba, kenke, amala, and semovita. Good tasting and supremely delicious without compromising blood sugar, blood pressure, cholesterol, weight management goals, and all diseases that one may be battling with. They also have a low-carb replacement for oatmeal, grits, and cream of wheat, which are highly dense in carbohydrates. Check out Alta Oats, Beta Oats, Clean Oats, as well as Kajma porridge and cream of laka when you visit our shop. The breakfast options are not just delicious, but meet the standards of an anti-inflammatory diet. All True Green Foods are all diabetic friendly. Find Green Health Pharmacy in Woodbridge, Virginia, or call us on 703-670-3640. WhatsApp 571-300-5039. Find us on IG at Green Health Farm. There's no better way for a healthy lifestyle. Remember, your health is your wealth.
All right, let's welcome my guest for today, Yasus, the dub poet Afari. Blessed love, Yasus.
Yes, sir. Greetings.
Yes,
Greetings,
yes,
beloved.
yes.
Everything cool?
Everything's said. How's the eyes?
Yes, sir. Doing good. Doing great. Hands full, but not complaining. It's all good. It's the work and the purpose.
All right. Enough thanks for checking in with us today, you know. Getting some type of feedback. I'm not sure where that's coming from. But I'm sure the text will sort that out. But yes, we can still go ahead. That's us. Blessed love. I just played that clip, but you were not online at that time. So I'd like to repeat that because I have a question based on that clip. So please stay put. Let's watch this one real quick.
Sometimes I feel like, so when I check out South Africa, and all the blacks them are suffer, and then I think about Ethiopia, and then we face with hunger, then me go remember Jamaica, and all the people them are suffer. I'm about to look to the foreigner, Europe and Canada, Australia and India. And then forget about Africa and the Caribbean area. It make me feel like crying. I feel like crying. I'm not lying. I really feel.
Yasus,
Yes, sir.
first of all, are you monitoring the show on another device next to you or something? I'm getting some feedback. I'm not sure
No,
if it's
sir.
coming from
I'm
this
not
one.
monitoring the show. I'm just really on the laptop.
Oh, okay, all right.
And
Thanks.
my phone is muted.
All right. Just to figure it out. I'm sure we can still go ahead. Yasus, before we go into the details of everything, I want us to, based on this song, for instance, you're talking about South Africa, Jamaican art form, but with an international approach. I want us to look at it from that angle. What is dub poetry?
Well, all right. First of all, if you want to understand dub poetry, you maybe have to look forward to maybe the 60s when dub was invented, which is pretty much the rate of the rhythmized version of a song. So the rhythm with stripped down to its very basic, essential, and some effects and some intriguing, interesting play with sounds and instrumentation. And so that was what gave rise to dub, which was popularized by people like, what people would know like Lee Scratch Perry, King Tubby's, among others. And then you would have known the input of the DJs, even people like Prince Farai and Yabby U, Daddy Hugh Roy, and the others. So here comes the 70s now, when poetry was introduced to dub. That's a kind of simple way of just making the connection. And so dub poetry now would be defined now as that art of using poetry to dub out the negativity and to dub in the positivity. Especially, you mentioned South Africa, so certainly you mentioned Mama Africa.
Yes.
And by extension, the people that were stolen from Africa and brought to the other parts of the world, especially in the context of Jamaica, the transatlantic genocide and the transatlantic triangle. And so in that sense now, dub poetry is really about the liberation struggle, dub out the folly of colonization, dubbing in the reality of decolonization, reasserting African identity and African consciousness in poetry and the arts and the culture and the life and the spirituality and the mentality and the politics and the economics and the foreign policy and the worldview of a people. You know, if you understand what I try to say.
Yes. They follow you. Yes. They follow you.
Yeah, so dub poetry is that art of using poetry to dub in. Because remember the word dub has a literal meaning in the English dictionary, you know. To
That's
take
right.
in, or to take out and to put in. So even if you look at the history of dub, is how you take out the vocals and how you strip it down to just the basic necessity. So in that sense, dub poetry speaks to liberation with a sense of urgency and immediacy for the liberation and the upliftment and the empowerment of the people. So we don't really go with the whole heap frills of traditional Shakespearean poetry, for example. We deal with issues of bread and butter, day-to-day reality, of telling our own story, of creating our own narrative, of asserting our own values, and reasserting our African identity as sovereign human beings. And so so dub poetry is really that liberative art form that really transcend the limitations of even just reggae or just poetry. It affects every era of the literary, cultural, and performing arts, as well as philosophy, academia, intelligentsia, theology, ideology, and so on. So simply put, is the art of using poetry and music to dub in positivity by dubbing out
Negativity. Yeah. And it's very, it comes across to me as a very intellectual, and pardon my use of that word, not to put anything or anybody down, but it comes to me as a high art, if you will. It's not some, even though it has what some people will call a street element to it. It also comes across to me as a high art. It's not something I can just take for granted. It's something that has to be studied to understood. Am I right about that?
Well, I would say yes, of course, absolutely. Because, see, remember, say education, is not really intelligence. And so, especially within our context, where our education model was imposed by the former colonial and neo-colonial masters or overlords. And so, for example, a man like Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who the United States of America claimed was pardoned by the president before he demits office on the 20th. But you could easily ask the question, who is going to pardon the United States of America? Are they even worthy of being pardoned? Not just as it relates to Marcus Mosiah Garvey, but as it relates to the gang rape of Mama Africa and the other indigenous peoples of our planet Earth. And so, if you notice, Marcus Mosiah Garvey never go to them formal school for beyond age 14. Yet he is one of, if not the greatest philosopher of the 19th and 20th century, and could easily claim a similar accolade for the 21st century. And so we look at intelligence from that perspective, whereby we have unfettered access to ourselves 24/7, and everything that is within is also without, and everything that is without is within, everything that is above is below. And so all our answers to our questions are within us as well. And so intelligence speaks to being able to excavate that innate, embedded intelligence that is in your DNA, that is imprinted in your psyche and your mentality, that is an ancestral heritage and legacy that is passed from one generation to the next. And so sometimes education now being predictive programming render you incapable of excavating your own indigenous spiritual knowledge. And so intelligence in that sense speaks to that ability to access and excavate and harness our intuitive and embedded awareness that we are born with and that we gather from our ancestral accumulation. And so education on the other part is just programming to suit the system. And in our situation, to be instrument and vessels and purveyors of colonialism and neocolonialism and imperialism and fascism and discrimination and disrespect to our mother, Mama Africa, that gave birth to all humanity bar none. So yes, you are right. We come with a certain level of intellect and militancy and awareness to alter consciousness, and to empower and to uplift our people so that we can reclaim our rightful place among the family of nations.
Nice. All right. So let's look at a bit of history, the history of the art form, right? How did it all start? As a movement, as an actual art form that moved from being an idea, a concept, to being an actual manifestation, i.e. the music that we can actually listen to, i.e. the message that we could hear the artist putting out, even outside of the music and all that. Tell us a bit of the history, please.
Right. Well, let me go a little bit deep, but I won't be long in the depths before we bring to the heights. Remember, if you look at the human being, from even what is available in archaeology, anthropology, ethnography, and history, theology even. In the beginning was the Word, according to the Bible, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word took on flesh and dwelt among man. You had that whole idea of the Big Bang theory. The ability to speak and to reason, and language and numerology, those were embedded in poetic memory codes in the human psyche and human gene at the very dawn of the creation of humanity. And so we would have known that humanity started out as a nomadic people, moving from place to place in the search of food and shelter and the necessities of life. And once the community becomes bigger and bigger, you couldn't be nomadic, so you start to have settled communities. And you started to domesticate, for example, plants and animals, which is one of the first revolutions, which preceded the Industrial Revolution. And so, fast forward now, whereby Mama Africa was dispossessed of her people and her children, just like other indigenous peoples around the world were as well in this colonial conquest. So certainly, we who were taken away from Mama Africa, we did not lose our identity, because as one of our brethren said, if a cow born in a pigsty, that don't make it a pig. So if we born in the spaces and plantations of the vampires, that don't make us a vampire. So in other words, now we retain our indigenous embedded knowledge from the dawn of creation. You call that the African retention. So I would link our poetry and our music to African retentive memory. Okay. So now, in the 60s when we were aspiring for liberation and so on, obviously music would have emerged. But even before then, there was a woman called Miss Lou. And she had a poem called Dirty Tough, which was produced by a fellow poet, dub poet called Mutabaruka. And that was written in the 1940s. And very little was changed when it was recorded, I think, in the 1980s. So that in itself is instructive. So what I'm trying to say now is that, just as we referenced earlier, when the reggae music came about, it started, it emerged from, there was Mentor, there was Ska, there was Rocksteady, then there was reggae, then there is dancehall, there's dub poetry, and so on. Now there is so-called trap. So the things keep evolving. So what we're saying now is that at that stage, in let's say the 60s now, when the idea of dub started emerging, and I referenced maybe a song called Voodoo, you can mention the Paragons, you can reference King Tubby's, Lee Scratch Perry, Striker Lee, Scientist, Blackbeard, even King Jammies, and so on and so forth. So that, at least Scratch Perry certainly, and so that was the invention of what you called dub music, and we described that earlier, what dub music is. So now, other decade, which would be the decade of the 70s before you go into the 80s, then you had the emergence of people like Okonuru, for example, Linton Kwesi, Johnson Mutabaruka, Mikey Simit, Gene Binta Breeze, Godfather, Poets in Unity. I can't call every name, just call what comes readily to mind, but there are many others. And so for example, my personal self, I started writing in the 70s, about mid-70s when I was at high school, St. Elizabeth Technical High School. And so once I started working with a telephone company in the it was 1980, we started kind of reinterpreting our poetry, maybe inspired by Miss Lou, to make it a little bit more Afrocentric, make it a little bit more in line with our aspirations and identity and heritage as a people.
So hold your stick up in yourself. Don't listen.
Gave birth now to sorry.
I was just trying to chip in real quick.
I didn't get you.
I was just trying to chip in real quick. I'm trying to establish that at this time you were studying. You had already was in the line studying regular poetry, right? But now you're getting a vibe like, no, we need to revise what we're studying to reflect our own identity. Is that what you're saying?
To reflect our own identity. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, roughly speaking. But what is important though, is that people like us, for example, like quite a lot of us poets, many of us were born in the rural communities, and even the ones that became urbanized. And so the rural communities are rich in African retentive memory as well. I mean, if you look at Kumina, Gere, Gumbe, if you look at the music, if you look at the ritualistic traditions, if you look at the struggles of the Maroons, if you look at the struggles on the plantations, Sam Sharp, Paul Bogle, Nani, Kojo, Taki, you would recognize that there was always that presence of African retentive memory in the culture and in the music and so on. If you look at even how the language in and of itself evolved, it will speak to that reality as well. So our poetry from the very beginning was flavored with some elements of those, and some element of rebellion, and some element of reasserting. We were not really conquered in the sense that we wanted to be the next Shakespeare. You know what I mean? We were saying, even if we don't find a poet who we could easily identify with, we still self-confident enough to we want to be our own poet. So therefore, at the very beginning, you would have employed maybe a little bit more of formal English and infuse some of your local, what they call patois words. When now we reach that point that you just brilliantly referred to, was when we made a more conscious effort by our growing awareness to infuse more of our own reality to further realign and reinforce our African identity. and our value system and our worldview and our perspective and our theology. Because you should not now forget that Rastafari is an indigenous and authentic response to the genocidal crucifixion of colonialism and slavery. We are a people who were killed, crucified, and buried into the grave, but we refuse to die. As a matter of fact, we conspired with the grave, and the tomb became a womb and gave birth to I and I. The children of the Black Resurrection, who are now breathing new thoughts, new values into the temple of the family of humanity. So, dub poetry, reggae music, our creativity, our theology, our Rastafari liberty, our worldview as it relates to God, food, humanity, the environment, these are actually elements of the resurrection, of the rebirth of a people who refuse to be downtrodden. And so the music in that sense are really, the music and the art and the different expanse of the creativity are really elements of and tools of liberation and upliftment and redemption and salvation and ultimately reparation and ultimately the reinstallment of Mama Africa on a throne of honor and glory as the mother of all humanity. And these are the thing there. And so our work, that's why we deliberately don't describe ourselves as entertainers. We are edutainers. So we use the arts and entertainment to uplift and inspire the people, not to be a punk or a clown.
That's right. All right. So you did mention Oku Onora. And interestingly, the next clip that I want to play makes the point almost exactly that you're making. I want us to watch this real quick, and then we'll be back, and I want your reaction to that.
To define what I was doing, I wanted to identify myself with something I could relate to. I could not relate to poetry, to poet. Because then the connotation of poet, the whole thing conjured up an image of Shakespeare, Longfellow, Wordsworth, and that was alien to my culture, that was alien to my state of mind. Poetry, like music, appeals to the universe, regardless of which culture you're from, which language you speak. You can relate to poetry, because poetry appeals to the emotional senses. Music, is also universal. So the combination of the two, for me, would create a double-barrel effect. Because I see my poetry as a weapon, word bullets, a shotgun, a double-barrel shotgun.
Sometimes I feel like, so when I check out South Africa, and how the blacks them are suffer.
So to define what I was doing, I wanted to identify myself with something I could relate to. I could not relate to poetry, to poet. Because then the connotation of poet, the whole thing conjured up an image of Shakespeare, Longfellow, Wordsworth, and that was alien to my culture, that was alien to my state of mind. Poetry, like music, appeals to the universe, regardless of which culture you're from, which language you speak. You can relate to poetry. Because poetry appeals to the emotional senses. Identify myself with something I could relate to. I could not relate to poetry.
Yasus, what's your reaction? First of all, I think he's making the point that you were making just before we played the clip, number one. And then number two, he's talking about...
He's generally regarded as a godfather of the art form. And I think pretty much his definition of the art form is a guiding idea in the definition that most of us subscribe to. And he would have already spoken eloquently to the idea of identity and relevance and finding something that we can relate to, relevant, and something that is a part of us. And so in a sense, it was almost a rebellious move. Just like how in this 21st century, we have to unlearn and relearn in order to move forward, because we have been taught a lot of lies. And certain people who are not worthy of even our association have been imposed upon us as icons and people that we should revere and look up to. And that is almost like teaching your child to worship and respect the person who raped her. So it's almost reclaiming your human dignity, your autonomy, your identity, your sovereignty. So the poetry and the music and the different areas of the arts and the theology, especially from a Rastafari African perspective, it's really allowing us to assert our human dignity and integrity and value and sovereignty.
All right. So let's look at some of the elements that make up the art form. I think you've covered some of that already. But in general, if we say dub poetry, what must go into it to make it dub poetry? If you take a track, or if you take a song or a message, however you call it, what should go into it to make it?
Well, you would have already recognized, the fact that it's dub poetry. So poetry is at the root of that as well. So the elements of poetry, the metaphor, figurative, the imagery, emotional intelligence, Oku referred to emotions, to vibes, feeling, whichever way you want to describe it. So we say emotional intelligence infused with the other elements of poetry. Then the other idea of dub now is to consciously use the poetry and the attendant music to put forward a different perspective. Don't forget that every song is a poem set to music, So poetry is the foundation of music as well.
Basically.
And like our brethren, Burning Spear would say, Christopher Columbus is a damn blasted liar, and we know say a liar is a thief as well. And the history show that Columbus and him cohorts and him associates are liars and thieves. And so we are here now to rewrite the history. Because if you right, you're wrong, So we are making the wrong, we are substituting the wrong with the right thinking, both of self, value self. So you won't bleach, you won't process your hair to look like your enemy. You know what I mean? You accept yourself and your attributes, and knowing that those are inalienable attributes that help you to be better human being and to function within the environment to the best of your potential. So those are important elements. Community is another important elements of the art and of poetry as well. Identifying with somewhere, someone, some ancestral lineage and heritage, and standing, as we would say, on the shoulders of our ancestors. So continuity and connectivity. So community is an important part. An element of theater is also important to poetry and to poetry. And I would say even fashion, not fashion in the regular sense, but how you adorn yourself should be a reflection of who you are, your culture. So that is why it's not by accident that we try to identify with African fabric, African art, African aesthetics.
And not just that, Yasus.
Of the holistic approach to asserting African identity.
Your hair, the way you wrap your turban, all of that. Yes. Same. That is a statement.
Yes, that is a statement. Thank you. So our thing is to make statement with the art. But I think Bob Marley did say reggae music and news. Good news as well, because we know that the role that the mass media play as mass communication, but it's an art of mass destruction, because energy flows where attention goes, So if we as a people go in ourselves and come out ourselves with what we find inside ourselves, then we will be focused on who we are and our purpose. Now the enemy want to use the media to distract us so that we lose our focus. Remember, say, anytime you keep your focus, the focus, it's not by accident that it named focus. So, it's really about keeping the focus and not being distracted by the media. So in a sense,
free them way there. Me no check them way there. Me no turn them way there. No, my youth, me no move them way there. Me no flex them way there. Me no let them way there. No, my youth, I'm free them. Me no let them way there. No, my youth, I'm free them.
All right. It looks like we have
So the poetry and the music is about rewriting history. Rewriting history, telling our own narrative. Because when the hunter run out there so and start telling people about the story of the hunt, you know, them glorify the murderous, genocidal hunter and vilify the hunted. You know what I mean? I say, in another sense, in terms of language, we interrogate language and concepts because the language is used as a form of neuro-linguistic sorcery. It's not by accident that you say you spell a word because a word casts a spell. So we determine what spell we want to cast and how we want to exorcise the demonic possession of the neuro-linguistic sorcery, the one that the language imposes upon us. So a part of the poetry again is to interrogate language so that language can be a truer reflection of what we are trying to communicate and our own values and perspective and idea of self.
All right. And you did also mention Muta Baruka. Muta has been one of the most visible, if you will, of the dub poets. Let's watch this short clip of Muta and we'll be right back to talk some more.
Christopher Columbus was an Italian who spoke Spanish. The Arawak, I should say the Tainos spoke Arawak, because Arawak is really the language of the Tainos. But we actually believe that this guy come and say, oh, I like your land. Could you give me a piece of your land? And say, okay, take that part. And say, okay, all right. In the name of King Ferdinand and Isabella, this part is our one. Arawak's your one that. No go so. Them land pan the thing, when them love the land, them just kill the people, them take with them land and that is. And I actually wrote down the words that Columbus said to me. I am Christopher Columbus. Just call me Chris. I am he who did miss the land, India. I thought I'd discover that which was never. How clever of me to see the land beyond. I came to tame and claim in the name of Spain.
All right. So, again, if you watch this clip, and I wanted us to watch this clip because of the points that you've been making so far, Yasus. I'm also looking at Muta. Muta has also made a statement of the fashion that you mentioned, right? So we see that element there. We see the poetry right there. We see the music. We see the connection with the reggae music, and not just reggae music. You've also taken us deeper into connecting with the retention of the African intelligence and all that. We're learning a lot. Now, I'm also looking at Muta, his message and all that, connecting it with yours. When I personally met you in Ghana over 20 years ago, the message has not changed in the sense that it's still the same militant, pro-black standpoint. Let's connect that with your messaging about South Africa and all of that. At the time, Jamaica had its own issues, but you were not just concerned with Jamaican issues. You were concerned with issues about black people across the world. And you identify South Africa, for instance, as a country that probably has a worse situation than Jamaica. Talk to us about that. Yes.
Yes, it's a very good observation, that, and very true observation, my brother. And people like Marcus Mosiah Garvey could get some credit for that. So while we maybe act local, we don't think local, we think global. And His Majesty Haile Selassie I again really pointed us in that direction for organize and centralize and for African unity in harmony with the teachings of Marcus Garvey in relation to Africa. So even though we were domiciled on a little island, the Rastaman will tell us that we not give up a continent for an island. You know what I mean? It's not just a continent either. It's the only continent that is grounded. So we always from early see, even if we never articulate it that way, we see Mama Africa as the mothership of the ancient future. So we never want to surrender with African identity and reality for an island, I mean, in the midst of the Caribbean Sea. So we always look to Mama Africa, and we don't really want necessarily, even though we have a strong connection to Ethiopia, we see the entire continent as being the homeland. And some of us, we were not necessarily intimately involved with the individual colonized history of the different countries that were carved up and given back to our people. So we wanted to look, we more speak of Africa as a whole rather than the nationalistic country by country sort of idea. So we help to infuse the notion of one Africa in that pronouncement as well. So we always look forward to Africa, from the teachings of our ancestors, from the retentive memory, and from even some of the customs. I mean, in our communities. I'm from a rural village, and if you go into my rural village, when I came to Ghana, it was like, wow, because the same way the houses are built, the yard, them layout, the compound layout, some of the very food where we eat, they have blue jars, which I think you call fufu, but some of the very things that you do in Africa, we do it here without being taught, oh, this is something African. We get it from the granny, we grandparents, we get it from the people who are around, and so when we become a little bit more aware, and get more access to things African and to African history, then it became more evident, and we became more assertive and more empowered. And so the struggle continues, as they would say, a luta continua, and it's a war. We're not giving up. And so this idea of emancipation, which was hijacked and replaced with this notion of independence, and for example, in Jamaica, we are independent dancing now for 60 odd years, and we have abandoned the edict of emancipation. And so we don't want to give up or become complacent and to be trapped into a state of false security. We know that the ultimate victory is with total decolonization, total liberation, total emancipation, when we have access to the land and we people, and when we land and we people have access to us, and when we can build the bridge of the resurrection to go to and fro as we have a mind to our continent and to build the continent, and so that Mama Africa will play a role as the continental mothership and as the custodian of the planet Earth and the human family. You know what I mean? I say? So we come in like we are the oxygen and the blood we are circulate through humanity and through the different lands and the different indigenous peoples and traditions. And so that's why we stick to that foundation and that militancy, as you would have described it. If you know, say, yo, we now take the eye for the price, and we now abandon the narrative and go take up the vampire them narrative. We are keep to our narrative, and we now stop until it become acceptable and it become fashionable too. You know what I mean? I say, and we see how that happen. No disrespect to people like Garnet Silk or even Tony Rebel. When I introduce African print-centric attire to them, they say, no man, if you think that, man, that's not our thing. But it never take them long to realize that it's our thing. You know what I mean? I say, so we have to keep doing it. You know what I mean? Because even the food, one time they used to say, breeze I go blow you away and all kind of stuff. And now even Christians and non-Christians and people who are hostile to Rastafari are embracing. I mean, we could enumerate many other things. So it is important to stick to it.
So what if the breeze I go blow you away? Because you what? You
I know that.
I never heard that.
And now it becomes so fashionable that if breeze now go blow away, it not qualify. Look at all the models, them directly starve themselves. Fear
So
no
much
breeze to
them
blow them away.
them sweat to make breeze blow them away.
Yeah.
All right, Yasus. So, all right. So you've mentioned Miss Lou. We've heard a bit about Oku Onora. We've heard a bit about Mutabaruka. Of course, we know Yasus Afari. For somebody who's trying to dig deep into some of the names, the notable names. For instance, they're trying to dig up more music, for instance, in this genre. Give us some other names to look up, please, and some instrumental, names in the art form.
It's not about I. Is about us or the collective. You have people like Linton Quayside Johnson, who was born in Clarendon in Jamaica, but migrated to England, and he is really an international force of reckoning for both the art form and to literature and to the struggle in that part of the world and elsewhere. So you have people like Benjamin Zephaniah, who unfortunately passed away a little while ago, but he is continues to be a force in that regard as well, both in academia, in intelligentsia, for poetry and for music and so on. You have a brethren now, which you must not forget, who is Mikey Simit. Mikey Simit was stoned to death on Marcus Garvey's birthday at a place called Stony Hill. So at the time I was going to college and they started performing, and I likened him to Stephen, who was stoned to death. And people used to connect Mikey Simit and myself because I emerged in that same period of time, just a little before he transitioned. And so, there's always a special connection with him as well. So Mikey Simit is somebody that you must check out, as well as Jean Binta Breeze. She's another force to be reckoned with. You have to think of people like a group called Poets in Unity. Alikai and Tamlin Ellis, Shaka Bantuta. You have to think of a youth like Blacker Ellis. He's somebody I've not really quite met as yet, but they call him Godfather. I don't remember his formal name, but they call him Godfather. I think he was on Spanish Town, St. Catherine. People like Cherry Natural, in a almost the same era as well. And then there are other people who claim that we help inspire them. People like Richard Innocent, Wise Words, Rasta Kura. No, I leave out anyone, but you just can't remember everyone. But there's quite
these.
And you have a virgin called Ras Fikri. He's not as active these days as one time, but he was really a special one. You have a sister in called Ashakai. She's currently in London. She was there from in the early days, but she's more asserting herself. I think she has an EP coming out this year too. You have a brother called Stepper. He was at the University of the West Indies when we met, but he's quite a potent poet as well. You have Royal African Soldiers, which is a group, the acronym Royal, RAW, Royal African Soldiers. RAS, sorry, Royal African Soldiers. You have a brethren called Ras Jaja, but you also have a brethren that did some work with, I think, Shanaki and maybe Ras Records, called Ras Pido. Ras Pido is an important elder whose work you might want to check out as well.
Same Ras Pido from Rastafari Elders?
Same Pido from Rastafari Elders?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So he's considered a dub poet also.
Okay, so he's considered a dub poet also.
Yeah, you must check his work. He has some very, very interesting work. I did some work with him back in the days. He wasn't quite around long enough after we met and after we recognized his ability.
Oh.
But he's also related to another poet whose name I mentioned called Ras Jaja. I think he's a nephew. Ras Jaja is the nephew of Ras Pido. So Ras Pido is another important.
I've heard Ras Pido's works in the Nyabingi chants and all that. I've not heard his.
In the UK, who's a very good.
Works in the Nyabingi channel. I've not heard his.
Sorry?
I've heard Raspido's works with the Nyabingi chants and all that, but I never knew he had works with like the poetry in that genre like that.
Yeah, man, you must check it out. You'll find
I'll
it online.
definitely do that.
And if I find a link, I'll send it to you. But it's not difficult. It's not very difficult to find. Raspido, Pidow.
Yeah.
You have a virgin in the UK now. He's called Mokapi Selassie. He's also another interesting. I met a poet in New Zealand, Upper Hutt, called Word. He's an interesting dub poet as well. And even on the Mama African continent, not coming readily to mind, but I've met a few on the continent as well who would identify. In Canada, quite a few as well. And the UK, has always played an important role
Yeah.
in the genre, Canada as well as Jamaica. Those are the three pillars, I would think,
So,
of poetry globally. There are
so yes,
others,
sir.
but those are the three major pillars, I would think.
So when you take say reggae, for instance, you find say solo artists, you also find a band or a group. When you take almost any other genre, you would find solo artists and also groups. Do we have anything like that in the poetry? Is there like a group that identifies as this is a group in that genre? Hello? Yes, sir. You hear me?
You hear me? Yeah, no, you're not coming through clear. But I think I get the essence of what you're saying. So in terms of my interpretation of what you're saying, I try to respond. The poets are versatile still, you know.
Radio culture.
Rastafari are the real example, so we bless it and set it as a sample. Mother Harlan just get crumple, can't stop the powers of the militancy. We royalty, you with the authority, black regality, all African beauty. Smile and bless up the temple, spotless and clean, not even one pimple. Royal.
All right, we have Yasus back. Yes, King.
Radio culture.
Yes, Yasus.
Yes, we're forward, yeah. What?
Yeah, all right. Yes. Yeah, so I was asking about the group. Is there a group?
Well, yes, as I mentioned, Poets in Unity, they don't quite operate as they used to, but the different members are there. Royal African Soldiers, they don't operate as a group again. They operate, Jinsu operates by himself. Rastakur operates by himself. I think occasionally they would regroup. There was another group called, name must slip me now, but one of the members passed away, so they're not quite operating as a group again. So a group is a little bit rare in poetry at this moment, because it's not the most commercially viable art form. You have to really work a little bit extra hard. And so it's not the easiest thing to maintain any group, and more specifically a poetry group. So it's not a common sighting these days, but the historical look would show you quite a few. In terms, for almost the same reason as well, outside of Linton Kwesi Johnson, you don't really have a band working as popular as it maybe was in the 70s and 80s, because it's a distinct art form. So sometimes people want, and we operate within the spaces of universities and prisons and schools, and especially with America popularizing the idea of spoken. Oftentimes people really want us for us and with us. I mean, you maybe have, sometimes they want backing tracks, which we don't promote aggressively really, but they just want you, the word, to speak and to motivate and to inspire and to just recite the poetry and perform the poetry. But we still want to retain elements of the band. So occasionally, I was in Canada last February, we worked with a band. I'll be in the United States next month. I'll be doing spoken word and I'll be doing some stuff on tracks. But we have some other plans to re-enter America this year with a band. And so it's not the easiest thing to maintain a band, and so it's not as frequent as it was one time. So the poets, most generally speaking, now operate as solo performers.
See, so Yasus, what has it been like down the line? You just mentioned that it's not very commercially viable, right? It's an art form that you have to be committed to, have all your heart in it to be able to hold for so many years. How has the development of the art form been like, and how have artists or poets, I should say, been able to maintain themselves till now?
That's an interesting question. What happened is that, my brother, you have to look at even Rastafari, which influence the works of many of the poets, even if they don't identify as such. So we always look outside the system. We always want to be self-reliant. We always want to be our own so-called boss, to want a better expression. And so we have always been operating at the margins and the fringes of the society. The same thing was the case with all the reggae greats, including Bob Marley himself. It was after the international community started celebrating him that even some of our own people started to celebrate. And the same is true for almost all the other major reggae performers up to this day. And then there is a pushback from the colonial mindset within our own people and outside of our own people, so that people with a certain message, they are not given the full media attention and media access, and hence the commercial availability is impeded. But we as resilient people who are relentless, we have been creating and finding ways and means. So for example, we diversify our portfolio. So we do lectures, we do workshops, motivational speaking, we do research, we do consultancy, and we do the regular performances in theaters, in schools, in arenas, and even stadium. And so we create synergies with other art forms, and so it's kind of, I think the people who survive would be people who function and maybe speak as if this thing is a calling. It's not just something you do for popularity or for ego or hype, or maybe just mere employment. It's something which you do out of a passion and a commitment based on who you think you are and based on what you think your purpose is. Certainly that is my personal testimony. And so I studied engineering and I digressed and embraced my own self and my own art form. And it has not been a bed of roses, but it has not been a bed of thorn either. It has been very successful, I might say, comparatively speaking. Yes. And so what happened is that at a particular point in time, this might have been after the 90s, coming into early 2000s, people started to speak of the art form in sepulchral tones. And I used that negative to become a positive and challenge my own self to ensure that that does not happen. And that is what gave birth to events like Poetry in Motion, Jamaica Poetry Festival, and now the One Love Festival. So, for example, Poetry in Motion is now celebrating 22 years on the 23rd of February next month, and becomes the longest running annual event in the English Poetry One-Day Festival in the English-speaking Caribbean, and possibly further afield. Jamaica Poetry Festival is now celebrating 15 years this year, and we are now inaugurating the One Love Festival in Negril on the 15th of March 2025 at Woodstock Negril. So in a sense, we kind of all know, become very prolific in terms of poetry events and activities that poets can have access to, and to help give the public access to the art form. And so in 2020, right before the pandemic, I did an album called Dub Poetry in Your Face, which featured Muta Baruka, Gene Breeze, Brother Resistance from Trinidad. He's also somebody we need to think about for dub poetry. Brother Resistance from Trinidad, as well as Winston Farrell from Barbados. So they are on that album as well. Mikey Simit, DYCR, I can't forget DYCR, as another poet who we need to check out. He was also featured on that album. A Sistian who referred to herself as a mad poet. We also included Kabu Mahat Keru of RFM, Running African Fame. We also included Professor Edward Barr to embrace academia as well, because there are several people in academia who supported the art form. when the naysayers were trying to talk down to the art form. And so some of these people are one of the very notorious one is Professor Mervyn Morris. His poetry is something that people should check out as well. Obviously, Miss Lou, but also Professor Mervyn Morris from the University of the West Indies, as well as Professor Edward Barr. And there are a few others as well. Don't forget also that Marcus Mosiah Garvey was also a poet who used poetry in quite the same way that we look at it as a tool of liberation and empowerment and upliftment as well.
Yes. Yasus. We cannot leave the interview without speaking about poetry. Two things we cannot leave the interview about without speaking about. I'm going to save the last one for the very tip of the tail end of the interview. But for now, we cannot leave this interview without speaking about poetry in motion. You just mentioned poetry in motion, and you just mentioned 2 other festivals that I need to dig up more about. But let's focus on poetry in motion for a little bit, because I have been following poetry in motion, and yes, you have successfully held that event or series of events for quite a long while now. Tell us a bit more about poetry in motion.
Right. Well, you see, my first album was called Dancehall Baptism, not by accident either. Then we had Mental Assassin, Honor Crown Him, Gift of Vision, Yasus Afari and Friends, Kiss Me Neck, Revolution Chapter 1, Public Secret, Golden Spoon Maroon. So we have been quite prolific in terms of recording, but we never have enough platforms to perform on. I was the one who initiated and originated Rebel Salute, as well as Garnet's Hill Birthday Bash. We don't want to get into that, it could be potentially controversial, but there was a parting of ways. And so that became one less platform for us, the poets. And so we wanted to create platforms that wouldn't just serve us, but serve others, but that we could have the control of and the direction of. And so Poetry in Motion became one of those first initiatives and first ventures. So that was started February 29th, 2004. And so we are celebrating our 22nd anniversary on the 23rd of February next month. So what happened was an inspiration that came about after I visited Ethiopia in 1996. So we visited Ethiopia. Muta was there as well, to Honorable Utan Green, Kabu Mahatkeru. We visited Ethiopia on the 29th of February 1996, which was itself a leap day in a leap year. And so it's not by accident that this started. You can't go into a long story, but it's not by accident that this event started on a leap day in a leap year in 2004. And so the idea was to really use poetry as a custodian and a leader of the literary, cultural, and performing arts. And so you would realize that Poetry in Motion celebrates music, dance, comedy, storytelling, fashion, and poetry. Our original mandate from the very beginning was clean, intelligent fun for the entire family and community. Our thing was not entertainment, but edutainment. Our idea was social responsibility, self-reliance, entrepreneurship, culturepreneurship. And so we identify a needy entity in the community and will support them with parts of the proceeds. And so we have been able to give a charity check to a charity or 2, sometimes 3, at the event every year for 21 going now to 22 years, even during the pandemic when we didn't sell 1 ticket. And so we present that on stage for transparency purposes. And we start on time. For the last 15 years, we have not started late. For Jamaica Poetry Festival, for the 14 going 15 years, we have never started late. So in other words, even though it might sound simple, we are trying to inculcate certain values and attributes into our people by being punctual, by being responsible, socially responsible, by being
clean,
by being self-reliant, by being a force of our people's upliftment and empowerment. And so Poetry in Motion is an epitome of all these and more.
Interesting. And before I bring in the last thing that we need to speak about also, let me seek your advice for the creative arts industry in Ghana. You have been to Ghana. You are familiar with, at least to a certain degree, with the setting over there. Now, if you look at the creative arts, Jamaica, to me, from where I sit at least, is a case to be studied by many countries. Small island, but such a big impact on the world in terms of marketing its creative arts to the world. Looking at Ghana, what advice do you think you can give us over there?
Well, yes, with all due respect, because our mother we are talking about now and a very significant nation within continental mothership. But we say keep writing. We have a saying that I am popularizing, if you're not right, you're wrong. So we have to keep writing, to keep telling our own story, creating our own reality, making our own history and her story. So we encourage the people in Africa, generally speaking, but in particular Ghana, to keep writing, keep looking within yourself, keep finding and searching for the answers in our traditions, in our culture, in our language, in our value system, in our history, in our ancestral knowledge and connections. Keep nurturing that, keep sharing that, keep institutionalizing that. It is important to build institutions and to build intergenerational and institutional wealth. So when you excavate the thing, you have to preserve it, you have to keep nurturing it, you have to institutionalize it, you have to share it with your family and your community and the entire African continent and to the global community. Keep making in linkages. We have to network with each other. Iron sharpen iron. Energy flows where attention goes. So we have to look out for each other, connect with each other. We have to stay true to the cause of African redemption. Our mother was violated. She was gang raped, but fortunately, she remained a virgin. We have to brush off Mama Africa, clean her, close ranks around her, nurture her, honor her, and glorify her. We want to hail up Abraham Toure from Burkina Faso, who, when he visited Ghana recently for the inauguration of your new president, he took off his beret off his head when he was greeting that VP woman. Yes. Making a statement again. We talk about making statement. We have to make the statement to our people that this is who we are. These are the values that we celebrate. This is what we must uplift. These are the peoples and the values and the things we must uplift, which will ensure that we are sustained and that we can prosper. Mama Africa should use our art form, Ghana and the rest of Mama Africa, the diaspora. We must use the art forms and all the resources at our disposal to ensure that Africa has a place at the Permanent Security Council of the United Nations. For crying out loud, we must find a way to be in BRICS. We must influence the opinion and the direction of the world community and put Africa agenda front and center. Once Africa unite, the whole world will unite, you know. If Africa not unite, the whole world can't unite, you know. If Africa not prosper, the whole world can't prosper, you know. So we want to look about the prosperity of Mama Africa, and Mama Africa to have her voice among the family of nations and in all the platforms available to human beings on planet Earth. And we, the creative people, the players of instruments, the poets, the performers, the creative minds, the creative people must use our own energy to ensure that these things happen. And we can do it. This little speck in the Caribbean island, we started out with a few million people, now we're up to 3.8 million people. And we have impacted the popular and prevailing culture of a civilization. Not just a civilization, but of a colonial empire. You know what I mean?
Yes,
and we have resisted successfully against neo-colonial pushbacks to make our voice be heard and to impact even our people on the beloved Mama African continent. So learn from us, learn from Marcus Garvey, learn from the struggles of Haile Selassie, learn from Bob Marley, learn from all the poets. We have named them and there are others who you might know, the unsung heroes and sheroes. Find them, bring them out, nurture them, and as you would say in Jamaica, big them up and present them so that at least our people continue to live even beyond the grave, because as we say, we live that death must die.
Yes, Yasus. Now, finally, before we go, let's watch this clip and we'll be back to talk about it.
Do it temple. Let me tell you that plain and simple. Rastafari are the real example. So we bless it and set it as a sample. Mother Holland just get crumble. Can't stop the and say, we royalty, you with the authority, black regality, all African beauty, smile and bless up the temple, spotless and clean, not even one pimple, royal African queens with your inner beauty, cutie, you can't violate for me temple, let me tell you that plain and simple, oh no, now go violate for me temple, let me tell you that plain and simple, you could have screwed till you blue and wrinkle.
Smile till you sprawl for your dimple. Ununa go violate for me temple.
Let me tell you that plain and simple.
Don't play.
Alright, my brother.
Don't play.
You
Look here,
don't
you know, see,
play.
I see almost the exact same outfit me in today as one of the outfits we wear in that video.
In that video.
And my daughter, my youngest daughter, Mikaya, is in that video as well. And a part of that video was done in my mother's house that we grew up in. I did that deliberately to show the interconnection and interconnectivity across the generations, the ancestral linkages, the roots of us as a people. So we're making statement for us to have that synergy with my daughter, who at that time was 8 years old. She helped wrote the song, she performed in it. We developed a challenge which went viral, and we included the people who were in that
challenge in
that
the
went
video.
viral in the video as well.
Yes.
So you see, poetry has a duty to play in community, the intergenerational, the institution building, the networking, and all those were chronicled in Plain and Simple, which was featured on my current album called Golden Spoon Maroon, which pays tribute to Mama Africa and all indigenous peoples. Beres Hammond is on that album, Ainika Moses is on that, Tono Hope is currently in Ghana, is on that, and my daughter Mikaya, affectionately called Mick, is on that as well. And that was considered for the Grammy Awards in 2023. And that became one of the 5 best reggae albums in Australia for the year 2022. And so, you know, we keep pushing the art form. We celebrating the 22nd staging of Poetry in Motion next month, the 23rd of February in Mandeville. And we do at the University of Technology, my alma mater. It was then called CAST, College of Arts, Science and Technology. That was where my poetry started. And so from last year, we returned to UTech with the 14th staging of Jamaica Poetry Festival. And now, for our 15th staging on the 10th of August, we'll have it here as well. We are inaugurating the One Love Festival because we have to go forward to peace and love and unity and justice. We have to promote one heart, one love, one earth, one love, one humanity, one God, one aim, one destiny. Jamaica has to play a leading role in that as well, with the music and the poetry and so on. So One Love is intended to do that on the 15th of March this year at Woodstock in Negril. And so we have other events coming up that, you know, we'll share with you from time to time. And we have other events as well. They have the Calabash Literary Festival in Jamaica that is done now biannually. And so we just encouraging people. We have this poem, which is held in Portland by Rastakura. And so we're just telling people to support poetry, support the art form, support our own community, and remember that, you know, it is critical for us to organize and centralize and to have one state of Africa. You maybe call it the United Nations of Africa, the United States of Africa, it doesn't really matter. We want one people, one continent, so that we can speak to the world community from a position of unity and consensus, and look about our collective interests and share and trade among each other as one African family, one African people.
Always, yes, Afari, enough thanks and enough respect. As we bow out, final words. And one of our listeners is asking for a freestyle. So maybe instead of the final words, it's up to you, King. You want to give us a couple lines because people want to have a feel of what we've been talking about for the past hour or so.
All right. And we have Yasus Afari music on YouTube, which has 5 of my 9 albums uploaded. The rest are in the process of being uploaded. But I want to salute the women. You know, them say, our Father who art in heaven. So that means they say the woman are in heaven then. And we know say, so above, so below. Them always try to say, in the beginning, God. So God did talk to himself right there, did talk to him, queen, him, woman, him, goddess. So we want to pay a tribute to the feminine with this poem, a few lines from the poem, saluting our women, just like Ibrahim saluted that VP in your country. And we are happy for that. We want to keep supporting that. Woman, I love you. You know, me really need you. Me love you, you know, say me honor you. Woman, I love you. You know, me really need you. Me love you, you know, say me honor you. The first time me said for me, I pan you. Me heart start beat that me no know if we do so me take me time and me think about you. Use my mind, scrutinize you. Me heart and me soul just embrace you. Me find out say you full of inner beauty. Inner for me hand you put your innocence in. You make me little heart feel glad and happy. Woman, I love you. You know me really need you. Me love you, you know, say me honor you. Woman, I love you. Need you. Love you. Need you. Love
Radio,
you.
country.
Honor you. Forever. And the same thing applies to Mama Africa, to the people of Ghana, to we feminine people around the world. Balance, father, mother, and children, sun, moon, star, protons, neutrons, and electrons. One family, we say. And so we want to always center and nurture the woman. We mustn't use the art form to try to belittle, undermine, and disrespect the woman. That is something we must lead to the heathens and the she-dens, because we know, say, a man, woman, and child, father, mother, and children. Balance the thing. God and the goddess, the father and the mother and child. We not fi go around that, and we not fi borrow no alien lifestyle fi come contaminate and pervert and violate the thing. Make we keep it honorable and immortal and righteous and upful. So that's why we are say we take the opportunity to salute the goddesses among us, the mothers among us, the sisters and the aunts among us, the princesses among us, the feminine energy within and among us.
Every time, Yasus. Enough thanks. Enough thanks.
Radio, culture.
Give thanks for
Radio, culture. Transmitting online.
No, my you, me not pray them way there. Me not check them way there. Me not on them way there. No, my you, me not move them way there. Me not flex them way there. Me not meds them way there. No, my you, me not pray them way there. Me not check them way there. Me not on them way there. No, my you, me not move them way there. Me not flex them way there. Me not meds them way there. When me see people things me there, make it time.
Mama Africa, me love you. Yeah. Ghana, we need you. Yeah. Well, I'm Yasus Afari, the cryptic warrior, live from Jamaica, representing for radio culture, GH Reggae Dancehall, the very best of the best.